This afternoon at the Chilliwack Cultural Centre, a half-abandoned art form is going to be revived. The Chilliwack Players Guild will be giving a live reading of a BBC radio play called A Pearl in the Hand. The play was last heard in the 50s when the BBC commissioned a series of crime stories from novelist Austin Stone. Years after Stone's death, his son, Ed Stone, was looking through some old boxes and found an unfinished novel, which he edited and published. And he found the scripts for 10 radio plays he's performing one by one with the Chilliwack Players Guild. Matthew Parsons talked with Ed about how the scripts came to him and how his father got involved with radio in the first place.
He was quite a well-known crime novelist in the UK. And before the war, the Second War, he had written a couple of books. Then, of course, he had to serve in the army. And when he came back after the war, he decided he was going to write much more. And so that's how he really got into writing as a whole. He had 7 novels published. They were all based on true crime events. So, and even now, to this day and age, true crime is a
big seller.
It is. It can be. He did very well, and after he got into that, he started thinking, oh, maybe I should do some radio play stuff just for fun. And this was before TV, really. I mean, this is just a few years before TV took off. I think he wrote his first BBC radio play in 1952, and then he did 9 more over a period of 4 or 5 years.
And you've mentioned to me that the plays were broadcast live and were never recorded. Is that right?
Well, I'm only assuming that because a good friend of mine who works in the BBC, he searched high and low for any records of recordings. And he said, no, we have no recordings ever. And yet, I know that several of his plays were actually done in different countries.
Oh, sure.
So I'm assuming that there must have been a recording available at some time. But unfortunately, I've never been able to find any recordings of them.
So then I wonder how much you know about how these plays would have sounded to begin with, what the performances would have been like, what the music and the sound effects would have been like. Have you sort of been able to ascertain anything at all about any of that?
No, unfortunately not.
Huh.
But I mean, I know that they would go and do 2 rehearsals prior to the play. My father sort of started a series with BBC. It was called the Thursday Night Play or the Thursday Night Thriller or something like that. And that's how he got into doing quite a few of them, because it was like a series, if you like. And I never, unfortunately, I was too young. I mean, I was only sort of 10 years old, and
sure,
the play was done after adult hours or something, because there was a bit of blood and gore or whatever it was. So I was very unfortunate not to have ever heard any of these. But I can assume that there was some good background, noises and stuff. Going through what we're doing right now, trying to redo this, we're suddenly finding out how difficult it is to provide background noise that's effective. On our very first play last January, a year ago, there was a gunshot during the play. It was part of the play. So we had to pre-warn people that were in the audience, don't worry, this is not an attack.
Right.
But even though everybody had been warned, when the actual gunshot went off, everybody sort of jumped in the air. So we got quite a good laugh out of that.
Tell me about how the scripts for these plays of your father's found their way to you.
Well, that's very interesting because my father sadly died in 1979, and I had already emigrated to Canada with my wife and 2 children. And although I'd sort of been back and forth talking to Dad and stuff, and he came out here for a couple of holidays, I never really knew what had happened to these, and I never really thought about it. It wasn't something that was at the top of my mind, because I knew that anything we brought out was going to be in boxes anyway. So my brother, my late brother, had actually when my father died, he picked up all these plays and book manuscripts and stuff, and he had them in his house in Pinner, London, for 20 years or something. About 10 years after my brother had passed away, my sister-in-law said, you better take this box of junk that's been hanging around here for all these years. So that's how I ended up with them. And it was only when I joined the local genealogy group that I was looking for my father's birth certificate. And I thought, I wonder if it's any of those old boxes.
Huh. No kidding.
Yeah, seriously.
So you didn't even know that you had them, and you stumbled on them?
I knew there was something there, and I knew it was relative to some of his work, but it's in old moth-eaten packages and stuff, and I'd never really. I had a copy of each one of his books. I managed to get those on the internet over the years.
Right.
So I never really thought any more about that, but it was a bit of a surprise.
So then, what was that like for you reading those scripts for the first time?
Oh, that was pretty emotional. I have to be honest with you. It's really, it might sound a bit strange, but when I was reading not just his book but also the scripts, I could hear his voice because the way he wrote was the way he talked. So it was. It would have been so nice if we'd had some early recordings where maybe he'd had some input to this. But of course, the people who did the plays were, at the time, they were unknown people, but most of them ended up being well-known actors or actresses as the years went on, especially as TV got involved.
So when did you decide that you actually wanted to produce the plays as live readings as you're doing now?
Well, again, that's kind of a coincidence because what happened was, I didn't really think of the plays because I knew they'd been done by BBC, and it never dawned on me that we would ever try and do that again. But I did want to get the manuscript of the book that I found, which had never been published. And I couldn't understand why he'd had a book that wasn't published. And it was only as I started reading it and realizing that he'd written this so much later in his life, in fact, probably just a couple of years before he passed away. So this, in my opinion, this was his last hurrah, if you like.
Sure.
So out of respect of his memory, and I thought, why don't I just get this self-published? So that's what I did. Edited, transcribed it. A process I might not do again on retrospect. Well, having got that book done and published, I presented it to my local genealogy group saying, hey, guys, I've managed this book. Anybody want to buy one? And Astrid Bugeling, who's the president of our group right now, the Chilliwack Players Guild, she's a member of the genealogy group. And after she came out, she said, you don't happen to have any manuscripts of his old plays that you refer to, do you? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, yeah, I do. And so she said, wow, can we do one, And that's how it started.
What was the process like?
The way we were set up was we wanted to keep ourselves really dark because we don't want people looking. This is not an act that's being put on.
Right.
It's something we want people to listen to. So we all dress up in fairly dark clothing so we don't become obvious and stuck out. We stand up in front of the mic and make our little bit, whoever's acting what part. And at the side of I call it a bench, but it's actually a sort of a laid-out area where we've got seats, but we're sort of sitting a little higher than the audience, obviously. And on the side, we had this table, L-shaped table. So we'd have, a pair of shoes on the corner. So if you're anybody walking, it'd be
right,
that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, it was time for coffee or tea, and there'd be
stirring spoons.
You got it.
Yeah.
So basically, that's how we went through.
So tell me, were you surprised by anything when you were working on that first production?
Well, we didn't really expect a big sort of reaction to it. So we thought, well, let's just put one on and see how it goes. And it doesn't matter if it costs a bit of money. We basically just set up, and it was a full house. I mean,
oh wow,
first time round, and it was obviously a hit. So
the radio play you're doing this weekend is called A Pearl in the Hand. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's about?
The Hatton Garden district of London is very famous for its pearl and jewellery stores. I think there are 300 affiliated businesses and 50 plus stores. In Hatton Garden, which is a small area of Holborn in London. And it's been around for a couple of hundred years. But it's such a obvious focal point for anybody wanting to steal something.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it's had its moments with robberies and everything. But A Pearl in the Hand is based on the 1913 Great Pearl heist or robbery. And it evolves around a group of criminals planning to steal these amazing jewels, which when they refer to them as pink pearls, which is apparently very, very expensive. This pearl necklace was insured back in 1913 for £150,000.
Oh, my gosh.
And I think I read somewhere that £10,000 is the equivalent to $1 million these days.
Right.
Or whatever. So, you only got to do the maths, and all of a sudden you're talking about a $20 million necklace. So it fits in with some of these massive diamonds in the world and things like that. Anyway, it was obviously a key point of interest in the local robberies. So the play is based around the police trying to track down the criminals.
Do you have a sense of why your father gravitated towards these kind of true stories?
I don't think he even knew that some of his ancestors before him are very well-known writers. I mean, his grandfather was Sir Arthur Helps, who was Queen Victoria's Privy Council.
Oh, my.
And he'd written many, many books. And he'd also edited some of the Queen's books for her. So Dad didn't know that, but there must have been something there. I'm not going to say it was a genetic, but, something steered him towards that. But what steered him towards crime, I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of us kind of get quite we like true crime.
Sure.
I don't know why. It's horrible, really, think about it. He might have thought, this, especially going back in the 50s, he might have been able to see that there was a niche here for him to get involved, and having 7 or 8 books and 9 radio plays written about these subjects, obviously he hit the nail on the head.
So what are you looking forward to most about this weekend's shows?
Well, for me, I love working with these people. I mean, it's new for me. I've made quite a few more friends, which is great. I retired a few years ago, sold out my old business, and then, it's like, what do you do from here sort of thing. So I was quite happy to get involved in this. It's fun. We don't make money. That's not the intention. We're a non-profit group. But having joined the group and gone to watch a couple of their actual plays, they're not radio plays, but stage plays, it's nice to be involved in the community and have a group that participate in, putting on some good shows.
Is there anything you can tell me about the next one? You've got more coming up in the next one in June, right?
Yeah, we have another one in June. We haven't actually fixed the date right now, but June is coming up. Where I think it's Mystery in Pimlico. It's about a true poisoning effect. Adelaide Bartlett, who apparently poisoned her husband. But the nice thing about that particular show is that this was very early in forensics. So a lot of the story, a lot of the background to the story, which my father worked on, was based on some of the forensic issues involved.
Do you think you've learned anything at all about your father from diving into his work like this that you didn't know previously?
Yeah, I've asked myself that, and the answer is yes. I think it's a multitude of things. I mean, when a parent dies, and here we are now 40 years later, how many people are still really thinking and really involved on a day-to-day basis with their late parents or something? So the beauty for me, and not realizing at the time, is that this has actually brought me into a much better understanding of my father. Bearing in mind, I was very young when he wrote these plays. My mother died in 1959 when I was only 12 years old. So my father then had to go out and get a regular job. He couldn't tell the bank, I'll pay my bills in a year's time when my next book gets published. Huh. So I started to sympathize with what he'd been through and how he dealt with it. And also, especially as we're doing the play, as I said earlier, I almost hear him saying these things. So it's kind of like, it's good for me.
That is Ed Stone, the son of Austin Stone. You can see, or more appropriately, you can hear the Chilliwack Players Guild perform Austin's play, A Pearl in the Hand. That's the senior Austin Stone. This afternoon at the Chilliwack Cultural Centre, there are 2 shows, limited seating remaining for the 3 o'clock show, still some tickets left for the 12:30 show today. And Austin Stone's final novel, the one Ed polished and published, is called Missing, Murder Suspected, and it's available from Friesen Press.